Imagine a place so secure that even the world's most dangerous men whisper about it in fear. A prison where sunlight is a privilege, silence is punishment, and escape isn't just impossible, it's unthinkable. Welcome to ADX Florence, the most extreme supermax prison on Earth. Inside these concrete walls live terrorists, mob bosses, and killers who will never touch freedom again. But what really happens beyond those steel doors? What you're about to discover will change the way you think about punishment forever. The fortress beneath the Rockies. It sits quietly in the barren landscape of Florence, Colorado, an unassuming cluster of gray buildings framed by distant snow-capped peaks. To a passerby, it might look like any government facility. But those who know better. This is the United States Penitentiary, Administrative Maximum Facility, or simply, ADX Florence. Built in 1994 after a series of violent attacks on prison guards across the federal system, ADX was designed for one purpose: to contain human beings who could not be contained anywhere else. Even the architecture screams isolation. The cells are 7 by 12 feet, reinforced with concrete furniture, a solid steel door, and a narrow slit of a window angled so prisoners can see nothing but the sky. No mountains. No horizon. Just emptiness. Every movement inside ADX is a calculated operation. Prisoners are kept in solitary confinement 23 hours a day. The remaining hour, if granted, is spent alone in a small concrete yard known as the pit, where they can pace in circles under an open but caged ceiling. Guards communicate through intercoms and heavy doors, avoiding direct contact. The design minimizes any chance of violence, but at a cost: complete psychological isolation. Former Warden Robert Hood once described it as a clean version of hell. And he wasn't exaggerating. Inside ADX are some of the most notorious names in American criminal history. The Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, before his death. Zacarias Moussaoui, the so-called 20th hijacker from 9/11. Richard Reid, the SHU bomber. Ramzi Yousef, mastermind behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán, Mexico's most powerful drug lord. All locked within the same facility, but never together. In fact, many will never see another inmate's face again. Each day follows a routine so strict it borders on mechanical. Wake up at 5 a.m. to a meal slid through a narrow slot. No human interaction. No conversation. Surveillance cameras capture every move, from meals to showers. Even toilet flushes are controlled remotely. The silence is deafening. Some inmates talk to themselves. Others scream for hours, their voices echoing down the concrete corridors, a reminder that the mind doesn't need space to unravel. Inmates like Thomas Silverstein, one of the most feared prisoners in U.S. history, spent over 36 years in solitary confinement, most of them at ADX. He once wrote in a rare letter, "It's a slow, torturous death by design." Psychologists have long warned that extreme isolation can cause hallucinations, paranoia, and even permanent cognitive damage. Yet ADX remains America's ultimate symbol of control, a place where the government sends those it cannot risk anywhere else. And yet, even in a prison built to be escape-proof and chaos-proof, human nature still finds cracks in the concrete. Because what happens next, inside these walls, will reveal that even in absolute control, the system can lose control. The minds behind the madness, life and psychology in solitary. Inside ADX Florence, the body may be confined, but it's the mind that becomes the real battleground. Every inch of the prison is designed to break human connection. From the seamless concrete walls to the soundproof doors, every detail ensures that inmates are kept utterly alone. No voices, no touch, no compassion. But humans aren't built for isolation. We need sound, light, and faces. We crave stimulation. Deprive the brain of those things long enough, and it starts to eat itself. A 2014 lawsuit against the Bureau of Prisons exposed horrifying truths about life inside ADX. The case, Baycoat v. Federal Bureau of Prisons, was filed by inmates who argued that the conditions weren't just harsh, but inhumane. The documents revealed stories that could chill the blood of even the most hardened viewer. One inmate claimed he heard voices coming from the vents. Another said he saw figures in the walls. Some mutilated themselves, cutting their flesh just to feel something real again. There were reports of men smearing blood on their walls, others begging guards to kill them. And the guards? They were trained to be stone. No emotion. No sympathy. Communication with inmates was limited to simple commands: step back. Hands up. Cell secured. Any sign of compassion could be seen as weakness, or worse, manipulation. Former ADX Warden Robert Hood once admitted, "It's not designed for rehabilitation. It's designed for control." Every second of every day inside that fortress serves one purpose: to maintain dominance over men who once thrived on chaos. Imagine living in a 7 by 12-foot tomb, your only glimpse of daylight a 4-inch slit of sky. Meals come on a plastic tray. The TV in your cell, a small, flat screen embedded in the wall, is your only companion, a flickering portal to a world you'll never touch again. You shower alone. You exercise alone. You talk to yourself just to hear a voice. This is not just punishment. This is erasure. Psychologists call it SHU Syndrome, named after the special housing units found in high-security prisons. Symptoms include hallucinations, depression, violent mood swings, and severe anxiety. At ADX, these effects are magnified to an almost unimaginable degree. Doctors who have evaluated inmates there describe it as psychological waterboarding. You're not physically tortured, but your mind drowns in silence. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, who prided himself on intellectual superiority, once described his daily life at ADX in emotionless detail. "I live a simple life. I read. I think. I write." But beneath the stoic words, psychologists saw signs of a man fighting to preserve sanity in a place designed to strip it away. Some inmates lose the battle entirely. Michael Baycoat, one of the lead plaintiffs in that 2014 lawsuit, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He spent years screaming for help that rarely came. Court documents later revealed he had been placed in solitary without mental health treatment for over a decade. His crime may have sentenced him to prison, but the system sentenced him to madness. And yet, there are men who adapt. Some build rigid routines, push-ups, meditation, reading, journaling, to hold on to a fragment of identity. Others find refuge in religion or mathematics, carving invisible walls in their minds to protect what little humanity remains. One former inmate told 60 Minutes, "You start to create your own world. You talk to the ants, to the shadows, to the cracks in the wall. You create friends out of air because air's all you've got." It's haunting to think that the US government calls this place the cleanest, most controlled prison on Earth. But inside those sterile corridors, it's chaos of another kind. Mental chaos, the kind no bars can contain. For years, human rights organizations have called for the closure of ADX Florence or, at the very least, for a re-evaluation of its methods. In 2015, the ACLU described it as a place where men are buried alive in concrete. And yet, the Bureau of Prisons maintains its stance: ADX is essential. Because within those walls live men capable of catastrophic violence. Terrorists, serial killers, cartel leaders, people whose escape could ignite national panic. To the government, ADX isn't cruelty, it's containment in its purest form. To the inmates, it's a slow-motion descent into madness. And between those two truths lies the moral question that haunts every guard, every policymaker, and every American who believes in justice. At what point does punishment become torture? Because in ADX Florence, that line isn't blurred, it's buried under layers of concrete and silence. Monsters among monsters. The notorious inmates of ADX Florence. If ADX Florence is hell on earth, then its residents are the devils the world fears most. The prison's population reads like a rogues gallery of modern evil, men whose crimes altered nations, who become household names for all the wrong reasons. Yet here, stripped of their empires, followers, and power, they are reduced to nothing more than numbers and noise inside a concrete box. Each corridor of ADX has a different classification. There's H Unit, the most secure section of the prison, home to high-profile terrorists and those deemed national security threats. Then there's Range 13, a tiny corridor reserved for the most dangerous and unpredictable inmates. Few guards speak about Range 13. Fewer still have walked it. One retired correctional officer described it as a place where silence screams. He said, "If you ever walk through Range 13, you don't hear anything. No talking, no music, no footsteps. Just the hum of air vents and the sound of your own heart." Inside those soundproof walls are men like Ramzi Yousef, the mastermind behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. It was Yousef's idea to park a truck filled with 1,200 pounds of explosives beneath the Twin Towers, hoping to kill thousands. The plan failed. 6 people died, over 1,000 were injured. When asked in court about his actions, Yousef showed no remorse. At ADX, he's kept in permanent isolation, 23 hours a day alone, 1 hour in a concrete yard where he can see no one else. His letters to the outside world are monitored, censored, and sometimes never delivered. A former inmate once said that Yousef spent his days writing on the walls with toothpaste. Equations, notes, fragments of the past, his mind still working in chaos even when his body cannot move freely. Just down another corridor sits Terry Nichols, the accomplice to Timothy McVeigh in the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. Nichols is quiet, deeply religious, and has been described by guards as one of the more composed inmates. But inside his concrete shell, he's written hundreds of letters, long, obsessive manifestos about government corruption and divine justice. He prays daily, eats alone, sleeps alone, and hasn't physically touched another human being in over 2 decades. Then there's Richard Reid, the SHU bomber, who tried to blow up American Airlines Flight 63 with explosives hidden in his footwear in 2001. During his sentencing, he told the judge he was an enemy of America. Now, inside ADX, he's reduced to a number and a meal tray. His world has shrunk to the size of a coffin with a window to the sky. But perhaps no name sends chills through the world like Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán. Once the billionaire leader of Mexico's Sinaloa cartel, El Chapo was infamous for his cunning escapes, from tunnels, sewers, and even a maximum security Mexican prison. But at ADX Florence, escape is no longer a word in his vocabulary. When Guzmán arrived in 2019, the world watched. Helicopters circled overhead. Security was doubled. Roads were closed. Even the guards assigned to him were vetted through multiple intelligence agencies. The message was clear. This time, there would be no tunnels. Today, El Chapo spends his life in a cell designed specifically to prevent escape and communication. No contact with other inmates. No visits except from approved family and lawyers. He eats meals delivered through a slot and exercises in an enclosed cage with a roof of steel mesh. According to reports from his legal team, he suffers from headaches, depression, and memory loss due to isolation, the same symptoms that haunt nearly every man who has spent years inside ADX. Yet not everyone breaks down quietly. Some fight back in the only way they can, through defiance, through words, through madness. Zacarias Moussaoui, the so-called 20th hijacker of 9/11, once filed dozens of lawsuits from his cell, claiming mistreatment, conspiracies, and religious discrimination. He flooded the courts with handwritten letters, filled with rage and delusion, signing them, "Slave of Allah." Each document was both a legal complaint and a cry into the void, a reminder that even when silenced, the human mind demands to be heard. But the strangest, most haunting figure of them all might be Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. A Harvard-educated mathematician turned domestic terrorist, Kaczynski waged an 18-year bombing campaign against what he called the technological industrial system. His bombs killed 3 and injured 23 before he was captured in 1996. At ADX, Kaczynski lived in near-total solitude, writing letters to journalists and pen pals who found his anti-technology manifesto fascinating. He once described his cell as a place of quiet thinking, yet those who read his words saw a man still obsessed, still at war with the world, even from within the belly of the machine. But not every inmate is a terrorist or a high-profile killer. Some are violent gang leaders, mob enforcers, or prisoners who attacked staff in other facilities. ADX became the final stop, the end of the line, for those deemed unmanageable anywhere else. As one former warden said, "If you end up here, you're not getting out until you're dead. And many don't. Some take their own lives. Others fade into obscurity, forgotten men in a place built to erase memory. To outsiders, ADX Florence looks like order. Inside, it's a graveyard of minds, each cell a tomb of silence where power, ideology, and insanity all rot together. But even in this fortress, cracks have appeared, small, terrifying breaches that prove no system is perfect. Because in the years that followed, something unthinkable happened. Violence inside the most secure prison in America. And what happened next would shake the myth of absolute control to its core. The day control broke. Violence inside ADX Florence. 4 years, the Bureau of Prisons called ADX Florence escape-proof, riot-proof, foolproof. A place so controlled that not even a shout could travel from one cell to another. A prison designed to neutralize danger by isolating it, each man a ghost behind steel and concrete. But in the end, even ghosts can fight back. The first cracks appeared not in the walls, but in the system itself. Behind those fortified doors, something started to happen, something the architects of ADX never anticipated: human defiance. It began quietly, in the early 2000s. Officers started noticing that some inmates were finding ways to communicate through the plumbing systems, sending coded knocks through pipes. A few even managed to create homemade kites, tiny notes written on toilet paper, passed through drain holes or food slots. In a place where speech was forbidden, whispers became weapons. And then came the violence. In 2005, an inmate named Gary Watland, serving time for threatening a federal official, was found strangled in his cell. His killer? Sylvester Rivera, another ADX inmate who somehow managed to bypass layers of security to attack him during recreation. It was a chilling message. Even in a fortress built for total control, death still found a way. But the most shocking event came in 2008, the murder of Correctional Officer Eric Williams. It happened during routine rounds inside one of the most secure units of the prison system. Williams was attacked by inmate Clayton Fountain, a man already serving multiple life sentences for killing other inmates and guards. The attack was swift, brutal, and left every correctional worker across the nation shaken. Fountain had been confined for years in the most restrictive conditions possible. Yet somehow, the rage, the hatred, the violence, it all survived. It waited. The incident forced the Bureau of Prisons to re-examine ADX's protocols, but the damage was done. The myth of absolute control had been shattered. Even guards began to feel the psychological toll. Many spoke anonymously about nightmares, paranoia, and emotional numbness. One officer admitted, "You start to lose empathy. You start to see the inmates as shadows, not people. And when you go home, that mindset doesn't turn off." Inside those same walls, other inmates were fighting their own wars. Reports surfaced of men throwing feces at guards, smearing blood on their walls, or staging hunger strikes. Each act, no matter how small, was a rebellion, a reminder that total control over the human mind is a fantasy. In 2012, the American Civil Liberties Union released a report calling ADX a modern-day dungeon, exposing instances where mentally ill prisoners were left untreated, their cries echoing through corridors no one dared to enter. Even some guards agreed, privately admitting that the facility's silence was driving them insane too. Then came another blow to the prison's image: the lawsuit Baycoat versus Bureau of Prisons, which forced the government to acknowledge the mental suffering inside ADX. It revealed suicides, untreated schizophrenia, and a disturbing indifference toward human pain. The court documents painted a picture not of safety, but of institutionalized despair. By 2016, the world's attention briefly turned back to ADX when El Chapo Guzmán was sentenced to life there. The media dubbed it the place even El Chapo can't escape. But as the cameras faded and the headlines cooled, ADX returned to what it had always been: a quiet, invisible machine of isolation, still running, still devouring men from the inside out. And so the cycle continues. Each day begins and ends in silence. A mechanical voice echoes through corridors: "Stand by for count. Count clear." Meals slide through slots. Doors clang shut. Cameras blink red. Nothing changes. And yet, everything inside slowly decays. For some inmates, ADX is justice. For others, it's a slow-motion death sentence, not by the hand of the state, but by time and solitude. Former Warden Robert Hood once said, "It's not a place I'd want to die." Some of them will, though. And no one will notice until the food slot stays shut. And that's the chilling truth about ADX Florence. It doesn't just punish crimes, it erases existence. The price of absolute control. ADX Florence stands today, quiet as ever, beneath the cold Colorado sky. From the outside, it's perfect. No riots, no escapes, no chaos. But inside, something far more haunting lives on. The sound of silence, the cost of control, and the undeniable truth that no prison can contain the human mind forever. Each cell is a monument to fear. Each inmate a mirror reflecting the darkest questions of justice. What is safety worth if it demands our humanity? What is order if it comes at the price of the soul? Inside ADX Florence, the answers don't echo, they vanish. Because in this fortress of concrete and steel, the loudest sound of all is nothing. Fade to black. Title card appears. What happens inside ADX Florence will shock you,